and we'll get on as quickly as we can with the press conference. We have, unfortunately, time is a constraint. We have exactly 45 minutes flat. And I'll begin by introducing the people who are at this table, sort of as bookends on the producing core. At the far, far left, a man you met yesterday at the Bertolucci press conference. He's quite a can habitué, Mr. Jeremy Thomas. Sitting next to me, also the producer of the film, or at least the financier of the film, probably the man who gulps a lot before giving a go-ahead to a film, and the more he gulps, sometimes the better the film. He is also president of the Canadian Academy of Cinema and Television, Mr. Robert Lantos. When she came over with Luc Besson's Big Blue, Le Grand Bleu, everybody thought Jean-Marc Barr was an idiot to leave her for a dolphin. When she came over with Martin Scorsese New York Stories, she didn't say a word at the press conference. She was too busy laughing at Nick Nolte's lurid tales that he called research. In Pulp Fiction, her face was pierced in all sorts of interesting ways. This time around, she is halfway to a giga creature, Rosanna Arquette. She studied economics and philosophy at the University of Victoria in Canada, but came to comedy via Australia. She was the first Canadian to be accepted at the Australian Academy of Dramatic Arts. You may not know her. This may be the first time you see her in such a heavy-duty role. It certainly isn't the last time. Miss Deborah Unger. This actor has some sort of an in with the jury this year. He played a strip joint DJ in Exotica by Atom Egoyan, who had also directed him in The Adjuster. He was also directed by Francis Coppola in Garden of Stone and in Tucker. When Sean Penn went to the Toronto Festival as a director and was asked which actor he wanted to work with most, the answer came back as a flash: Elias Koteas. When she first came to our attention in the Miss Firecracker contest, what clinched it for us was, among other things in the performance, the speed at which she delivered dialogue and the twang. Raising Arizona Broadcast News, the firm, have confirmed this. I don't know if I wonder if that's the reason why it is as a mute that she got the Best Actress Award in Cannes and the Academy Award for Jane Campion's The Piano, Miss Holly Hunter. In Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, he went it alone, solo, and got the Best Actor award. Playing this time a universal donor, to put it mildly, the sky, if that's the word I'm groping for, is the limit, Mr. James Spader. For whoever read Empire of the Sun, it was obvious that this was not just a novel. The autobiographical accent was far too strong. Indeed, he was born in Shanghai. Indeed, he grew up in Shanghai. Indeed, he was interned in a camp. He now lives in England, but you wouldn't know it because he is one of the most elusive writers this side of Thomas Pynchon and J.D. Salinger. So it is with tremendous trepidation, and it is a great honor for us to welcome him today, the author of Crash, Mr. J.G. James Graham Ballard. He may look a lot like costume designer and Yves Saint Laurent, but he certainly doesn't deal in haute couture unless you want to redefine the notion. As such films as Dead Ringers and Naked Lunch and The Fly indicate, he is one of the two most twisted brains in cinema today, Mr. David Cronenberg. Did I forget anyone? I didn't forget anyone. Mr. Ballard, since you're sort of la pochette surprise of this festival and this press conference, you've obviously seen the film, sir.
You've seen the film? Yes, I have, and I was tremendously impressed by it. I think it's one of the greatest films on the subject of sexuality, violence, and the world we live in particular the motor car, that I've ever seen. A great movie.
Well, did you have any trepidation when you heard that your work was going to be adapted? Usually a writer says, when asked whether the film is faithful, follows the book, they usually say yes, like a mugger follows the victim. Did you have any trepidation initially?
Not when I first heard that Jeremy Thomas was interested in making a film of Crash, because he had such a tremendous track record as a producer. He's one of the greatest, certainly at present, the greatest British film producer. And then when I heard that David Cronenberg was interested in directing it, I thought, we're home and dry. This is going to be a masterpiece. And I saw the script. I was very, very happy with it. And a little while later, I saw the movie, and it's a knockout.
Did you visit the set at all, sir?
No, I didn't.
Question here.
Yes, good afternoon. It's Bruce Kirkland of the Toronto Sun. Question for David Cronenberg. And this is a twisted brain question. And I'm curious because there's a lot of the familiar themes that one could find in some of your other films over the years, like the allure of metal and machinery, the vulnerability of the human body, the alienation of living in the latter part of this century. And yet, I've never seen any of your films express any of these themes in such an overtly sexual and yet not sensual fashion. And that runs a risk too, I would think. But I'm curious for you to expand on the idea of expressing it in an overtly sexual fashion.
Well, I think really in terms of danger in the film, in terms of communicating with the audience, using sex and scenes of sex as an integral part of a film is strangely enough dangerous, because in most films the sex scenes are just a kind of a montage. The movie stops, you have the sex scene, and then the movie continues. And you could take the sex scene out of the film and not change it. And when people see 3 or 4 sex scenes in a row in a film like Crash, thinking of the normal way that sexuality is used in films, people are very confused because they think, well, when is the movie really going to start? But in fact, those scenes are the movie. I mean, they are an integral part of it. During those scenes, all those things that are important in the film are revealed. The evolution of the characters, the narrative, the philosophical meaning is all revealed in the sex scenes, as in the other scenes as well. But I mean, the movie doesn't stop when the sex scenes happen. I mean, that is the movie. And for me, that's really, I think in Videodrome, there's quite a bit of sexuality. For me, it didn't seem, it wasn't even an issue, I must say, creatively for me. It was just a natural part of what this film was, what the exploration of the book was, and I didn't really give it much thought, other than just the normal, the difficulty of making the film. Does that answer your question?
FX Feeney, People Magazine, United States. I have a question that could be taken up, I hope, by Mr. Cronenberg or the actors as well, because The film seems so absorbed with pushing beyond fear. At least that's the way I took it. And many members of the audience, not many, but a significant number, were walking out, I think, because it had gone beyond their level of comfort with the subject. It didn't go beyond mine. I thought it was a very brave film, but I was wondering your internal process in terms of developing the story. Did you reach a point, a kind of fail-safe point in yourself where you had to really screw up your guts to go forward beyond where you were at that moment? You as a director, or any of you as the actors, was there a point where you really had to be reassured or supported across a borderline?
Well, I mean, it was a dangerous, difficult film in terms of subject matter and structure and everything else, but in terms of the actual production, it was really a wonderful, I mean, this sounds strange. Physically, it was very difficult because it was very cold. It was a lot of night shooting, which is very difficult. We were on moving vehicles and so on. And then, of course, any scenes of sexuality are always delicate, difficult. But there was such an enthusiasm in the crew, the cast, for the project, that by the time we were actually making the film, all of those things were resolved. I mean, by the time the actors came to the film, those things were resolved. You cannot talk someone into doing a film like this. As a director looking for a cast, you can't say, no, please do this, it'll be okay. The actors have to know that they're ready to do it beforehand. So I think in a sense, all of those things were resolved before we actually started to make the movie. That's how it felt to me. I'm certainly, ask it of anybody else.
Well, would the actors comment on their reaction when they initially received the script?
I'll jump in. That same fear that you're talking about, that you presumed sent those people out of the theater last night, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was what sent them out, because it was the exact same fear that I felt the first time I read the screenplay, and then had the same feeling again when I read the book, and had the same pervasive feeling as I was making the film. The only difference was I decided to stay along for the ride and see what happened. And I found that fear fed the film and heightened the film and made it all the more curious and intriguing and provocative. And eventually the fear became the blood of the film, and therefore had the illusion of comfort and the illusion of ease, just because it was familiar. And I hope that that's what it becomes for an audience seeing it, that it never leave, that it always be there, but that people allow it to envelop them.
Ms. Hunter?
Well, I would say that one of the things that made the experience of doing this movie somewhat unique, although not entirely, is that a lot of movies that I've been a part of or have even peripherally experienced through actor friends or whatever, there's a great discussion on a lot of sets as to how the audience will perceive this scene. What response do we want to evoke? How would we like for the audience to feel at this point in the movie? And that simply wasn't part of the equation in doing Crash. It was, I felt that there was a delight in being a bit obsessed with telling this story by the cast. We talked about the movie all the time, and we never talked about the movie outside the realm of making it, outside the realm of each scene. Each scene was completely all-encompassing to each of us, so that there was never a prediction of how it would be received. And in that way, it's a very complete experience. I think, well, I can certainly speak for myself. Very, very complete that way, very, very satisfying. Because we weren't trying to predict anything. And I think that it's one of the strengths of David Cronenberg's movies is that they never, ever dictate to an audience how they are supposed to feel.
Ms. Unger?
No, I do think it was ironic that with such fear-based material, ultimately it became a love-based journey. It was never at any time as threatening or as alienating as perhaps I initially thought it could be. And I agree completely with Holly. The word delightful, it's perhaps an ironic word to extract, but it was a really delightful experience. And I personally was not perhaps predisposed to such a journey. And so I had no idea how I would respond. And I didn't have any reference points other than the immediacy of those involved and the interdependent evolution of each day, each scene. I think in retrospect, some things kind of do surprise me because it really, it was an immediate and very organic and different experience, but ultimately safe and, once again, ironically delightful.
Rosanna?
For me, it was really interesting the script was amazing, and because to play people that were desensitized and needed to find another way, sexually, in any way, I wanted to work with Holly Hunter, who's one of my favorite actresses, and Cronenberg, of course, and I enjoyed playing someone who wore her scars on the outside, very raw.
Elias?
My heart's, well, first of all, the fact that I didn't have to audition was good enough reason. But no, I'm just being silly. Well, I felt pretty exhilarated when I first read it. I read 4 pages. I loved it so much I put it down because I didn't want it to end. Having 2 months to prepare is a treat. And I've been an admirer of David's films since I became interested in films. And the idea of working with him and the actors that are involved was just, it can't be a better situation. It doesn't get better than that. There were other times, there were nights that I would go home and I would feel tremendously guilty. And my goodness, what are my parents going to think about what I'm doing? But it was just a lot of passion, love for the work. You learn your dialogue and you hope to God that on the day you feel connected. So you listen to a lot of different music. Makes you, you know, blah, 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 blah.
There's a question over there.
Here. Matti Paunio from Finland. I have a question for Mr. Cronenberg. When I reread Mr. Ballard's brilliant book recently, I found it very fast, neurotic, and noisy. But you have decided to interpret the book into a film which is slow, even meditative, and quiet. And I'd like to know what's in the back of this decision.
If you think the film is quiet, they probably had the sound turned down too much in the theater. Well, I don't know that it is meditative. It's a meditation on mortality and the phenomenon of human existence, and so that it should be meditative, I think, is correct. I can only say that, of course, a book and a movie are two different things. The media are quite different, and also a film takes on its own life. It takes on its own. If it's working properly, it takes on its own life. You discover that while you're making the film. You know how quickly people speak or they don't. How the rhythms of each scene work out, and of course in the editing and in the sound mixing as well, it's a continuation of the process. So it's not exactly a conscious decision to say I will make the film slow, fast. It does take on its own life, and so in a way I'm interested to hear you say that. It's very hard for me to experience the film the way you can, because of course I've been involved from the inside. But as I say, it's not really a conscious decision to do that. There are car crashes that are pretty noisy, aren't there?
Sir, and then sir.
Brian Johnson from Maclean's Magazine in Toronto. First, thank you for making our city look better on screen, more exquisitely beautiful on screen than I think it's ever been before. The question I've got, and this is one that a lot of people asked me last night as I was talking about the film, is that this film is a very unconventional film, but one of the conventional things about it is that there's more female, well, let's put it this way, the women get more naked than the men, and I'm wondering why that is. Is it a contractual thing or an artistic thing?
I don't actually think that's true. I think James is pretty naked in the film. I have to say, I think he's...
I don't want to get crass. The question that was asked of me is, why is there no male frontal nudity? And was that an issue, and was that a contractual thing?
No, I don't think it was ever a question, really. I mean...
I can address that.
He can address that.
I think that has more to do with geography than anything else. In most of the scenes, we were fucking, and when you're fucking, you don't see the penis.
Well, that's good enough for me.
I never thought of that.
Question over there.
Oui.
I just want to say, just in terms of, really, it was not contractual. There were the discussions with the actors, amongst the actors and myself, almost never, I have to say, had to do with that. I mean, it was always, how is the scene playing? How well will it play? You know, it was so obvious in the script what was required up in terms of nudity. I needed actors who were really not afraid, and I knew that I wouldn't get actors, as I say, who would come to the film but be wanting to talk into things or out of things. That was never an issue, really wasn't. So the scenes were played out the way the dialogue scenes were played out. That is to say, what's the most forceful way to play the scene? What's the best way to play it? Really, that was it.
A question here.
Oui. Bonjour, Jean-Marc Durand pour Le Progrès de Lyon. Une question pour M. Cronenberg. Vous semblez dans ce film avoir fait le moins de compromission possible. C'est ce que nous ont dit les acteurs tout à l'heure quand ils ont dit on ne s'occupait pas vraiment en fait de ce que pouvaient penser les spectateurs. Mais est-ce que ce n'est pas aller très loin et aller vers une forme d'hermétisme éventuellement, dirais-je? Merci.
You got that?
I didn't.
Oh.
He's got a funny accent.
Well. The question is a sort of follow-up on what Holly Hunter said, that the gentleman feels that there's no compromise whatsoever, that whatever you will discuss on the set never comprised how the audience would feel. The conversation was very much inside the set, confined to the making of the film.
Yes.
Isn't there a danger at that point of being a little hermétique?
I understand. Well, yes, I think it is a danger. I don't think of it as a danger. I mean, in fact, I think that the kind of hermetically sealed community that we had on the set represented the hermetically sealed community of the characters in the film. It was actually perfectly parallel to what was going on. And also, of course, part of the subject of the film is being hermetically sealed, being insulated from each other, not being able to connect, having to invent strange and bizarre ways to connect. And that is, in fact, the subject of the film. So I don't think, I know that Hollywood, we were not talking strictly about deciding not to communicate with the audience, but because that was not, of course, what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do was to create the life of the film and then allow the audience to observe it and be involved with it. It's a different way of filmmaking. The traditional way, sometimes when it goes wrong, is like product development, you know? It's like developing a new kind of a toaster. You know, it's you go out, you test it. The way it is traditional to do screenings, and then you reshoot the film, because in a way it's like letting the audience tell you what film they want. But if you do that, then you can only meet their prior expectations. You can't take them someplace new that they don't anticipate. I don't think the audience, I mean, there is a new sense of interactive art forms now with the internet and so on, where the audience is involved in creating a game or something. But to me, that's not the way art itself works. I think you need to lead the audience to some place that you yourself are discovering. It's quite a different process. And I think really that's what was involved.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that and just say that I do think that if you are aspiring to make something artful, something that is an artistic statement, you are paying homage to a point of view, a singular point of view. And that is what you stay true to. Now, when we were making this movie, I felt that we were discovering the movie as we were making it. I mean, we've talked about this before already at this press conference, but there were lots of elements and relationships and evolutions about this movie that we didn't know when we began, and we wouldn't know halfway through. So there would be no way that we could possibly try to manipulate an audience when what we were trying to do was discover the movie. I think it's a provocative movie, not a manipulative one.
Would that movie, could that movie ever be produced by an American studio? It took a British producer and a Canadian one to produce it. Has any of the studios got interested? And if any of them had, could this be a studio movie?
No, it would be impossible to conceive this film within the traditional system of making films. And that's why it took a long time to realize the film and to try and position it that it could possibly be made. In fact, a lot of people have been coming up to me and saying to me, why are you so perverse? Why is your taste so perverse? But, you know, we can't just have a diet of films that conform to set patterns. And so I think that there were, you know, a group of people joined that point of view, and we managed to make the film. I mean, you know, I think everybody who was involved in the film were broad-minded people. We've made a film that is for grown-ups, made by grown-ups for grown-ups. And it definitely could not exist within the traditional system of Hollywood, but that's very obvious from the material.
Well, I think to make this film, you have to be attracted to material that has some new light to shed on the human condition, which generally doesn't tend to be a major factor in deciding which movies the studios make. On the other hand, I have to add that what it ultimately made the making of the film possible was the contribution by various distributors who bought it before the film was made, and one of them was New Line Cinema in the United States. So, though it couldn't be made within the studio system, the interest and the support of independent distributors throughout the world is the essential tapestry on which this film was built.
Question over there.
Mika Siltala from Helsinki. To continue a bit on the themes that were up before, this is basically for the director and writer, but for everybody. I find the book hot and the film cool and distant, would this be a way to, I mean, would it be too dangerous for David Cronenberg to do the film, to go as far as the book opens the doors? I mean, the film for me was a divine experience, but it's sort of, for me, it's sort of not opening all the doors that would have been possible to open.
Mr. Ballard, to sort of sum this one question up, do you have the feeling that the film does not go as far as it could go, possibly because of the difference between writing and making a movie, or for other reasons?
I disagree entirely with that. I think in many ways the film goes further than the book I wrote. I think if you read the book, there's clearly an attempt going on by the author to justify the extraordinary events being described. I think what is so powerful about David's film and the tremendous performances that this cast gave is that they start where the book ends. They take for granted the strange logic that is unfolding through the film. There's no attempt to make the events being shown explicable in sort of conventional plot terms or anything of that kind. I think that's why the film is the sort of brain derailing experience that it is. And I give full credit to David's script, his direction, and the performances by the cast, which are absolutely of the first order.
Question here, then Monsieur there. Madame?
From MTV Lebanon, question for Mr. Cronenberg. Through the car crash, we noticed that the characters experienced new, new ways of making love and sexuality, and they are not conscious about the danger of death. So can we say that it's an extreme movie relationship, man-machine, or it's only a reflection of reality?
Well, I think what the structure of the film is it's a kind of a psychology which might become more and more common as time goes on. And it is a kind of disconnected psychology. And you begin with characters who cannot really relate to each other. They go through the form of a marriage, but they have no, they cannot connect sexually or emotionally really with each other. But they do discover by accident through a car crash and through meeting other people who've gone through the same process that there is a way to bring themselves back to life in a bizarre way, that they find that there is a new kind of emotionality, a new kind of sexuality that they're experiencing, quite to their own surprise, and that they become involved with a group of people who are in a very informal way, a kind of almost unconscious way, pushing further to explore what this accident, in literally and metaphorically, has revealed to them. For me, I think that sexuality is an invention now, a human invention. It began as a biological fact, but now it's obvious that we don't need sex to create babies. We don't need people to even meet each other to reproduce, to create a baby. And so then what is sexuality now? It's quite something different. It's now become a human invention. It can be an art form, it became a form of technology. And I think what you see in the film is that there are people now who have accepted, perhaps unconsciously, and this is what Mr. Ballard was talking about as well, they have accepted this, that sexuality and emotionality no longer have the normal biological basis. It's now something else, and they're exploring that. And I think that's really the process that they go through in the film.
Question here.
Lisa Nesselson of Variety and Film Scouts Online. While I was watching the film last night, it struck me how sad it is that there are so few drive-in theaters left in the world, because that would be the ideal setting to see the film. So for Mr. Ballard and Mr. Cronenberg, as men of imagination, ideally, how would you like to see an audience respond if they had the great good fortune to be in their cars while watching the film?
Well, I think I'll give that to Mr. Ballard. Well, let me just say that I think it's not an accident that the automobile and the cinema are exactly the same age. They're both about 100 years old. They both began at the same time. They've both represented the liberation of sexuality and a previously unimagined kind of freedom. And they both have compressed time, our understanding of time and space and reality. So I think they're very interconnected. Beyond that, I don't know if I want to say.
Mr. Ballard?
The ideal place to see this remarkable film, I suppose I should say, on your in-car entertainment system, traveling at 100 miles an hour. Being serious, or maybe I'm being flippant. I'd like to think I'm being serious. I think everyone who passes his driving test should be, in the years to come, should be given a video of this film. I think everyone buying a new car should be, in years to come, should be given a video, because this film is the best possible advertisement for wearing a seatbelt, driving slowly, and if you're going to have sex in a car, have it in the back seat.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.